Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the divine being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So it is our great privilege and distinct honor to have with us this morning Sister Eleanor Francis from the community of St. John Baptist in New Jersey. She's here in Atlanta visiting her sister Marie and very kindly offered to give us this talk this morning on Saint Teresa of Avila, who is a remarkable saint by any measure, and I'm sure she'll tell us exactly why that's so. So without any further introduction, she can say anything she wishes about herself and her background by way of introduction, but I'll just leave it at that. I've known Sister Eleanor for some time through the involvement with the American Vedantist and John Schlink. So, but this is the first time we've seen one another in many years. It's a great privilege. So thank you, Sister Eleanor, and it's all yours.
Thank you, brother. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. Vedanta is my original religion, you might say, the one that I first seriously practiced. I was a Vedanta nun for 15 years before I became an Episcopal nun. But I'm still a Vedantan as well as a Christian and also a Jew. So I'm a real strange interfaith person. But one of the things that brings all the faiths together is the mystical experience. If you find, what really is at the bottom of whatever religion you study, and what links it with all the other religions is mysticism. Saint Teresa of Avila was one of the great mystics. I'm going to tell you her story, and we're also at the end going to look at some of the books that she wrote. What I've done with this talk is to divide it into 4 pieces so that after each section, we can discuss together. You can say, what you've noticed, if you have any questions. It's especially interesting when people look at the link between someone like Saint Teresa of Avila and modern day spirituality or modern day life. What do you see it has in common? So let me start with Saint Teresa. Saint Teresa was a 16th century Spanish mystic and monastic saint. But before we focus specifically on her, it might be useful to look briefly at the history of Christian monasticism in general. As you may well know, Christianity was illegal for about its first 300 years. Being caught practicing Christianity could result in persecution at the hands of the Romans and even death. Some Christians actually sought martyrdom as a sign of their complete dedication to Christ and the way, as it was called at that time. But in the year 313 AD, the Emperor Constantine was converted to Christianity and formally ended the persecution. Now, an enormous question arose. Excuse me if I drink water now and then through this. An enormous question now arose. What would happen when those who saw themselves as servants of a carpenter and whose great heroes were fisher folk, slaves, and criminals condemned to death at the hands of the state suddenly saw themselves surrounded by imperial pomp and power? Excuse me. See, a lot more people have come on.
Would you like some hot tea?
Water is the thing, because I sometimes will start to cough when I'm. So when they see themselves as legal by the state, would they give way to the temptation of an easy life and social prestige? Some thought the narrow gate of which Jesus had spoken had become so wide that countless multitudes were hurrying past it, some seemingly after privilege and position. How was one to be a true Christian under those circumstances? Many found an answer in the monastic life, in fleeing from human society and seeking solitary life in the desert, especially in Egypt. The number of people withdrawing to the desert grew, and the desire of most of them to learn from an experienced teacher gave rise to a new form of monastic life, which was, and still is, communal monastic life. Throughout the centuries, there have been efforts to recapture the enthusiasm of the original monastics. When zeal seems to be lagging, someone comes along to give new spark to the monastic lifestyle. Saint Teresa of Avila was one such person. She was a chief figure in the Counter-Reformation or Catholic Reformation. The other chief figure of the 16th century Counter-Reformation was Saint Ignatius of Loyola, whom you may have also heard of him. Teresa was born in the year 1515 near Avila. She was born into a wealthy Spanish family, one of 9 children. Her grandfather was a converted Jew who had moved with his family to Avila after having been shamed by the Inquisition in his native Toledo. Convert ancestry was for the most part a closely guarded secret. What was the Inquisition? The Inquisition, which figured large in the life of Teresa, was a group of institutions within the government system of the Catholic Church whose aim was to combat heresy. It began in the 1250s and continued into the early 19th century. In Spain, the Inquisition focused particularly on people who had converted from Judaism or Islam. Converts were often considered suspect due to the belief that they had secretly reverted to their original faith. Although we don't have an Inquisition per se today, we have a milder version called the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which its purpose is to defend Catholic theology and doctrine. You may remember, some of you may remember, there was some years ago, American Catholic sisters were subject to this body and underwent apostolic visitations because of some fear in Rome that American sisters were not following proper monastic lifestyles. I remember the anxiety among some of my Roman Catholic friends, but fortunately the visitation turned out to be friendly. Getting back to Teresa, even in her childhood, she took much pleasure in the study of saints' lives, and she used to delight in spending time in contemplation, repeating over and over, "Forever, forever, 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 they shall see God." That's the goal in Vedanta, isn't it? But it's also really the goal among the mystics of other religions. Teresa's mother died when she was only 13. After that, she became quite worldly. She was interested in romances, fashions, and perfume. She wrote, "I began to wear fancy things since I wanted to be attractive and to fuss with my hands and my hair. I used perfumes and all the silly baubles I could get a hold of." Her father tried to save her by sending her to a convent school for girls from the nobility. But serious illness, which some believe may have been malaria, ended her studies. When doctors were unable to determine the cause or find a cure for her illness, she had to leave the cloister to undergo experimentation with some more drastic methods of cure, which left her nearly dead. After being in a coma for 3 days, Teresa somehow revived. Yet she was left so paralyzed that for 3 years she was not able to walk, and her suffering really remained with her for the rest of her life. So when you study what she accomplished with poor health, it's just extraordinary. During convalescence, she determined to enter the religious life. And though opposed by her father, she became a postulant at a Carmelite convent. The Carmelites, unlike most Christian religious orders, have no founder, but they began as Christian hermits on Mount Carmel in what is now Israel, Palestine. Teresa chose the convent of the Incarnation, known for its laxity in observing the Carmelite rule. There were nuns there who lived useful and holy lives, but there were also many women who, from a spiritual standpoint, should not have been in a convent in the first place. They were there because they had nowhere else to go. Some were widows. Some were put there by their parents. Teresa is known to have said, "A sad nun is a bad nun. I am more afraid of one unhappy sister than a crowd of evil spirits." When I think of the situation then, I believe it may be no worse now. What I mean is that modern day nuns sometimes wring their hands over the lack of vocations today. You know, we're at a period when convents are getting smaller and smaller. At least in the Western countries. Now, there may be some unfortunate reasons for this, like the secularization of society, but it is also true that nowadays women have many options and needn't enter convents because there is nowhere else to go. So hopefully we like to think that those of us who are in convents are there because we really should be, and not because there's no other choice. At the convent of the Incarnation, Teresa's wit and charm made her so popular that it became a fad for the aristocracy to visit and exchange pleasantries with her. She spent much of her time at the parlor grill, gossiping with her wealthy friends. But she herself was unhappy with this easy style of monasticism and spent much time as possible reading books of devotion. After recovering a good measure of her health, she enjoyed her first experiences of mystical prayer. But then in her 20s and 30s, she went through a long period of difficulty, very dry period. This is how she described her prayer at that time. It's always good to know even the great saints undergo these things. She says, "I don't know what heavy penance could have come to mind that frequently I would not have gladly undertaken, rather than recollect myself in the practice of prayer. When I entered the oratory, I used to feel so depressed that I had to summon up all my courage to make myself pray at all. Later on, with her dry wit, she would caution the nuns about excuses for not praying. Hardly does our head begin to ache, then we stop going to prayer, which won't kill us either. We stay away one day because our head ached, another because it is just now aching, and 3 more so that it won't ache again. So that's the end of section 1. Do you unmute them, or do they all unmute themselves?
They unmute themselves.
Okay.
And we'll let you know. So as you know, dear ones, this is the opportunity for us to study this together. So offer anything from your own wisdom or experience, express any concern, or ask any question you have.
Yes, Uma.
Yeah, please. First of all, it's such a tremendous thankfulness with regard to saying this, that I did not know a thing about it. I'm so happy that you came to us to speak about this.
Oh, thank you.
I speak for everyone, I am sure. Now my question.
Yes.
Question, comment. This person, and particularly she, being she, a woman of that time,
Yes.
had quite a, what you call, conflicting personality in the beginning. She was two-minded. She went for worldly things on one hand, and on the other hand, she then turned towards the other extreme, or I could be wrong. So what I'm trying to say, that it's not normal to go through conflict within yourself, and then something can emerge which can save you, which can define you. Am I right? Is my observation right? That you need conflict to come to your goal.
That's true. That's true.
Thanks. Yeah.
Fortunately, she felt conflicted in her original convent.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't be studying her today if she had not.
Right. And amazing that she achieved so much, so many books she wrote, and amazing.
Yeah, we're going to get to the books. That's the last section. We've only done the first of 4, so keep that in mind. Anybody else like to make a comment?
I just wanted to say I'm really appreciating this additional background on her, because I know very little, but a little. We've been reading her as part of Daniel Ladinsky's Love Poems from God. She's one of the saints that is featured in there, and there's a little bio. But I'm really liking what I'm hearing about her, and she's my kind of nun. Say that. So I'm looking for the rest of the talk. Thanks.
Yeah, well, you'll see how her life changes in the next section.
Can I make a comment?
Of course.
I am Mr. Uma.
You're
I am Mr. Uma.
Uma.
Mr. Uma.
Mr. Uma, that means you're Uma's husband?
Yeah.
Okay. Got that.
Okay. Very, very, very happy to have you here. This kind of dialogue, this kind of interchange is vital need of our current times. So your arrival is very auspicious.
Thank you.
Having said that, your first comment that I'm a strange interfaith itself was strange to me, because the way we were raised in India, the word interfaith was never used. That I learned after coming into this country. Otherwise, to have different religions come together and develop a common language and common understanding was a part of the norm. What is called Sarva Dharma Samabhava, treat all religions with the same equanimity.
Well, isn't
Second
that
point I
in the
wanted to-
Upanishads?
Yeah. The second point when you say sad nun is no nun, that gave me the idea that we have thousands of icons of different religious denominations. Not one of them has a sad face. Take it Buddha, take it Krishna, take it Muhammad, any one of them. If you do not smile, you do not qualify for spirituality.
Ah,
And that
interesting.
comes as a very natural outcome of spirituality. It infuses that joy, a spontaneous joy, like a geyser coming from the earth. So those are the 2 points which attracted my attention as I spoke. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Those that have their cameras off, does anybody want to put them on? It's more fun when we can see you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, Saragam, Atlanta. Okay. Molly. Hi, Molly. Hi, Dennis. So any comments before we go on to the second section?
Yes, ma'am.
Moran.
Sister, yes, ma'am. Question. So it seems like from the first section, sister had Saint Teresa of Avila. She had a conflict within herself, and I see that to be a common theme everywhere, pretty much. Like if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it was delivered in the battlefield.
Yeah.
So I think, do you need to go through turmoil to really realize?
Yes.
It seems, I don't know of any saint that didn't go through turmoil, or ordinary person for that matter, because we have the pull between the world and the spirit and spirituality. The way the world is very, it's very.
I think you have to be bereft of the materialistic pull, I guess, of the world. Means somehow that needs to be stripped away from you. Like even the Christ, he had to be on the cross, and it wasn't easy. It's unbelievably painful. Means whatever he had to go through. Similarly, Buddha had to, like, he was nearly dead by the time he attained salvation under the Bodhi tree.
Yeah.
45 means people couldn't recognize him from the tree. So seems like that is very important, I guess, and
Yeah.
feels like it.
Yeah. Okay, why don't I go to the next section, because, and there'll be time to talk after that, and the third section and the fourth section. So I don't want to keep you here all day, but we'll go on to the second section. So this is her in her original convent in this section, and how she grew unhappy with that. Teresa was dismayed when the Inquisition published a list of forbidden books, which included most of her favorites. In her earlier years, Teresa's way of trying to feel the presence of God was largely through reading books to help her focus her thoughts. But one day she had a vision in which Jesus told her, "Fear not, I will be to you like an open book."
Oh.
From then on, such visions became increasingly frequent. This led to a prolonged inner struggle, for she had no way of determining whether the visions were genuine or were caused by a demon. What's more, sometimes she would levitate. even publicly, much to her embarrassment. She would then ask other sisters to sit on her to prevent her floating away. A few of the nuns that she lived with were sympathetic, but most were frightened. They had to endure her wild displays and hear from buzzing visitors, if not from one another, about the dubious favors that God had bestowed on her. Most of the women lacked even the minimal education that inept confessors, who were always men, of course, inept confessors, they were not in a position to evaluate her experience. So she sought confessor after confessor, few of whom were advanced enough in spiritual life to be of any help. Some were frightened by her unconventional experiences in prayer and tried to change her course. But that turned out to be difficult, not because Teresa wanted to disobey them, but because, as she often pointed out, God was directing her as well. It is always important to keep in mind that the confessors lived under the fear of the Inquisition, but God did not. For 20 years, Teresa wavered between God and the world. Haven't you, every one of us, felt that?
Yes.
Maya's very strong, isn't she? Oh my goodness. But then we also have within ourselves somewhere the knowledge of who we really are. So we waver back and forth, most of us. Finally, with the help of learned friars like St. John of the Cross, she came to the conviction that her visions were genuine. Now, this is one of the things about Vedanta that's very strong, I think. Vedantins usually have a guru, or encouraged to have a guru. So you have somebody you can actually talk to. St. Teresa did not have a guru until she finally found St. John of the Cross. And it's not, it's a weakness, I think, and at least in the Episcopal Church today. Okay, so with the help of learned friars like St. John of the Cross, she came to the conviction that her visions were genuine. When she was nearly 40 years old, she experienced a classic conversion experience. She had gone into an oratory where someone had left a very moving image of the wounded Christ. It was as if she had never seen such a thing before. Suddenly, she was on the floor in a great flood of tears, and by the time she got up again, she felt more at peace than she had in decades. Teresa persevered and began to experience the constant presence of Jesus, like a person in a dark room whom you cannot see but know is there. She grew in mysticism, self-sacrifice, and charity. Now, St. John of the Cross, who's really almost as well known, I think, as St. Teresa, he figured large in Teresa's life. He was at times so out of this world that as he walked along, he would tap the wall with his knuckles to make sure he was still on earth. Now, Vedantins can understand that better than Christians, yet he was one of the few with both the depth of experience and the practical wisdom to serve as a guide for Teresa. He was a man so short that when she met him, St. Teresa is said to have quipped, "Lord, I asked you for a monk, and you've sent me half a one." As I've indicated, the monastic life moves in circles. An order tends to begin strictly, so much so that it needs to be loosened at times to accommodate normal people. However, once loosening begins, it is likely to continue. As is said, You can't put the toothpaste back into the tube. When things get too loose, the order is in danger of disintegrating. At that time, God willing, a courageous leader begins a reform. Teresa was one such leader. She felt that in her time, people had forgotten the monastic spirit of the great men and women of the deserts. If we remembered it in our time, I don't know if there's a difference. Realizing that her commitment to prayer and a holy life could not survive in the scandalous convent of the Incarnation, Teresa initiated a return to the austere rule of Carmel. Some men's communities, like a group of Franciscan friars, had begun reforming themselves already. Groups of discalced or barefoot friars had begun to embrace poverty and abstinence according to their primitive rules. But no one expected women to initiate reform. Now, why is that? Because women are so weak-minded. They can't get it together. They're suggestible. The only way they can make any progress is under the rigorous surveillance of men. That's why she was very radical in her day. She was most opposed by the nuns in her own convent, who felt that she was insulting them and could serve God just as well where she was, since others were better than she was. Some of them said she should be thrown in jail, but a few were more or less on her side. Despite all opposition, Teresa initiated a return to the austere rule of Carmel. It was to be a simple life lived in the spirit of the ancient hermits of Mount Carmel. Teresa became one of the primary figures of what is called the Counter-Reformation, a war waged within the Catholic Church, not just against the Protestants, but against corruption within itself. The Reformed Carmel, and of course, the Reformation had happened 100 years earlier. That was a 15th century phenomena with, Luther and Calvin and all those people who tried to reform the Catholic Church. But the Counter-Reformation is from within the Catholic Church. They're trying to reform themselves. The Reformed Carmelites were discalced. That is, they wore sandals or went unshod. The primitive rule meant poverty, solitude, and hardship. The nuns wore coarse clothing and did not eat meat. Well, I'd be happy with that. They had no endowment, but lived on alms. They supported themselves by the labor of their hands. The convent of St. Joseph, the first convent of the primitive rule, which he founded, served as the prototype for 16 others. So she founded 17 convents. She was also active in the reform of Carmelite friars in association with St. John of the Cross. Despite rigorous opposition and scanty resources, she founded the first Reformed convent of St. Joseph at Avila in 1562. She was 47 years old, and her life was just beginning. Antagonists criticized her for running around founding convents when she should have been praying and spinning in her enclosure. Well-intentioned people warned her that she might find herself summoned by the Inquisition. So that's the second section of this. So you're most welcome to make comments, ask questions. She's just an enjoyable figure, isn't she?
Yes, yes.
It's sort of interesting that levitation was considered as like a embarrassment.
Yeah.
Is it like levitation is considered as was considered in those days as some power of the demon or something like that? Why was it considered embarrassing?
Well, also she's, I mean, if you're truly spiritual, you don't want to show off your spirituality. So if you're levitating, you look like, you're trying, like the TM people or something. When they were, what were they doing? They're teaching people how to levitate. So no, she didn't like that at all. That was an embarrassment. But I think when you study yoga, you can kind of understand why a person like that, who was so detached from the body, might levitate.
I'll make a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Tom. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so you asked earlier if all of us felt a conflict between the spiritual and the material.
Mhm.
I would say that I don't. I love the material. I love like good food. I love music. I love just looking out the window right now and seeing the trees and the bushes. I love the feel of my body. As I sit here in this chair, I can feel my body. It feels good. All of that to me is wonderful. And I don't have a conflict between that and what you might call the spiritual, the other experiences that happen. I can go too far, like eating ice cream, for instance. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with eating a few bites of ice cream, but I tend to eat more and more and more. But I don't think for me, everybody's different, and I can see somebody that would want to just sit in a cave and meditate all day or go into a monastery where life was really hard and strict. I could see somebody doing that. But then I can see somebody like me who I meditate daily and I enjoy that, but also I love the world. I love being here. Thank you.
Thank you. It looked like some people might want to respond to Tom.
I do.
Okay.
I feel a lot like that, Tom, but for me, there's no demarcation, as they say, between the spiritual and the material. They're all one thing, but now I don't see it as, I see it as spiritual. And I see the spiritual as material. I mean, it's all one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So no, there's not a conflict for me either. But it's not because they're different and I like both of them. It's because I like both of them because they're the same.
Ah,
And
yeah.
I would say I agree. I've always felt that to draw a line between the spiritual and the material, it's some arbitrary line or arbitrary definition that I've never really connected with, So
Did Sri Ramakrishna draw a line between the spiritual and the material?
I don't know. Let's ask an expert.
I mean, the material can be used for spiritual purposes,
Yes.
or it could be used for worldly purposes.
So when you use the word material and spiritual, where do you draw the line between what's material and what's spiritual?
I don't think I can draw the line anyway. But although I was not the one that used the word material, I don't think. I think I said worldly.
Is there a clear?
But yeah, I mean, what brings you toward God, and what pulls you away from God?
Mhm.
It could be, we have a beautiful flower vase here. It makes me think of God. It doesn't, really pull me away. What do you
So
think?
let's say there's a person who drinks alcohol and thinks of God. Is that spiritual or is that material?
I don't know. What did they think? What did Sri Ramakrishna think of Girish Ghosh? I mean, Girish was, that was not helping him. He finally gave up on the alcohol.
I think it depends on whether you, is it Swami Sridharananda or Prabhupada or one who says to divinize everything?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sridharananda.
Sridharananda.
To divinize. So if you divinize, if like Tom's looking out the window and enjoying the trees, he's enjoying his coffee, he's enjoying these things. I think to enjoy can be a worship without even calling it. You don't have to call it that, but those of us who have struggled with depression and anxiety, one of the interesting things is that for no reason at all, I can feel really awful in the same exact environment that I can feel joyous. So it's not about the actual material stuff there, my body, the trees, whatever. It's how I am connecting with them. It's how I'm relating to them. And if I see them as divine or part of the universal consciousness or whatever you want to call it, then the feeling is really different.
Yes.
May I add my 2 cents? The way I look at it, this world is created by God. We all are here because God intended to see the play of his Maya. And one of the poets in my language, Gujarati, he wrote that Brahman is putting on a show in which Brahman himself takes different forms. So it is like I am on the stage seeing my own Leela or Maya. So if that is so, why not to enjoy the world? But then comes the caveat in a proper way, that to enjoy a beautiful sunset or moonlit night or the birds chirping and see God in every part of the creation, in other humans, nature, streams, mountains, that's one way. And to get carried away by senses and to lose the insight or the original idea that everything belongs to God. And we are here to enjoy God's word. That was my one point. And second point, in Vedanta, there are 2 camps. The first is started by Shankaracharya, who was all for giving up the world and austerities and extreme of renunciation. But then came Vivekananda in 19th century, who talked about practical Vedanta. So there is, I think, the way we arrange our own story and combine elements of spirituality working in the world. And that's where I think most of us are. So no rejection of the world, but at the same time, not being carried away and lose our insight. That's how I feel.
Good. It's a detachment from the world. It doesn't mean,
Yeah.
Ima, it looks like you want to say something, but you haven't had a chance.
Francis, this is Haima from Denver.
Ima.
I want to make a comment about the worldly and materialistic. So far, we have read scriptures. No one ever said not to live in the world. They said, live in the world, but don't let the world live in you. Don't
Right.
indulge in it.
Right.
we have to live in the world. How can we survive without living in the world? And John Wesley, the leader of Methodist movement, said, earn all you can and give all you can. So that speaks, I think, volumes. We can do our worldly duties while being spiritual. Those
Yes.
two go hand in hand. I
Ultimately, they really go in hand as we're
Yeah.
get to the Vyavaharika Satya.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like-
So far, every religious scripture, no one ever said, don't live your life. Don't do the worldly things. You do the worldly things.
I think that worldliness is the
It's not-
attachment and the ego investment.
Don't be attached to it completely, that I can't live without this
Yeah.
thing. I can't live without that thing. That's what I heard so far. I just
Yeah.
wanted to put my penny worth. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
Thank you. Anybody who's not
Yes.
spoken like to speak?
Yeah, I would like to add a comment. The other day, in response to one of my questions, Brother Shankara reminded us of this, and I may be not quoting it exactly right, but what Sri Ramakrishna said was everyone wants to enjoy the magic, but very few want to get to know the magician.
That was Swami Prabhavananda, actually, who said that. Everyone loves the magic, but no one wants to know the magician.
Yeah. That's wow. Well, let me do section 3 here.
I have
Can
a
I get
question.
some more water? I for some reason today I'm especially having a problem.
So it's cold and dry.
Well,
Do you find
Sister,
them?
I have a question. Are you able to hear me?
oh yes, where are you? Oh, Dennis? No.
Sundar.
Oh, Sundar, I see you. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming to our congregation and making this talk. So, based on your section 2, which you are speaking, I have a question. So, you were mentioning like Saint Teresa of Avila followed the path of poverty, like she insisted the path in their congregation.
Yes.
But at the same time, you mentioned that the number of congregations, the number of convents increased. You mentioned 16. I forgot the number.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's founding new ones. Yeah.
Yeah, she founding new ones. So
She'll
how
do
does
that in this section.
Yeah. So I have the question. So if we are saying like, I have heard this sentence many times, like many of the organizations telling that you need to follow the path of poverty, but at the same time, like if you're going to increase the number of uh, like the convents or whatever organizations you have, so how does that go in hand together? Like if you're going to follow poverty and going to increase it, like where do you get the resources, and how does that fit in? Like I always used to have that question.
When you say how do you have the resources, do you mean how do you have enough money to sustain the convent, or?
Yes. So in order to raise the money, like it's basically like how do you get the money at the same time you path of poverty? So doesn't that conflict?
Well, the path of poverty for one thing means, usually in her style of monasticism or my style or Brother Shankara, everything belongs to the community. So you can't say, well, this is my car or even my computer, although you're using it all the time. It belongs to everyone, so it takes away from the sense of detachment. And the reason why poverty is part of the vow of practically any monastic community is that worldly goods, although we're just talking about enjoying living in the world, but worldly goods are a distraction. So, the more you can simplify your life, whether you're living as a householder, monk, or whatever, the less you have to take you away from your concentration on God and spiritual life. So that's, but now Teresa got really in trouble because she insisted on living without endowments. And in fact, that's just where we're going to get to now. Some religious communities have endowments and some do not. And if you do not have an endowment, it's more pure monasticism. But if you do, it's more practical. So whatever. So, okay. So this is the third section. Or did you want? Oh, I thought maybe somebody was saying something. The history. We're going to go into the third section. This is the last section before we get into what she wrote. The third section is about the founding of 16 more convents after she'd founded the first one. The history of the founding of the 17 Carmels of the primitive rule makes for an absorbing adventure story. All the Carmels, which Teresa founded, were within Spain, but Spain is a sizable country, and she usually traveled by donkey or mule. Remember the 16th century. Often the governor of the city in which she was making a new foundation was reluctant to give her a license. There was the difficulty, too, of finding a house. And here we're just talking about this. One of Teresa's most revolutionary ideas was that her convents should operate without endowments, but practice a strict vow of poverty. So what comes, comes, but you don't have a bank account and, live off the interest or anything like that. Learned men advised her to be comfortable and accept endowments. However, forgetting what made sense, she wanted to follow Christ's example. Isn't that interesting? What Christ taught, blessed are the poor, is that practical? Well, you could answer that later. When the bells rang for the first Mass at San Jose, the townspeople acted as if plague, fire, and an invading army were rushing over them. There were demonstrations in the streets. Shops were closed. People said that their children would starve as the nuns would take food right out of their mouths. Now, there were only 4 nuns in the beginning. 2 town assemblies were held. One of the dignitaries spoke in favor of Teresa and her nuns, saying that although it was perhaps unwise to insist on poverty, the nuns were harmless enough. But others were unconvinced, and the situation was not resolved without a prolonged court trial. Imagine, they're already holding court trials over. The matter of living in poverty was finally granted by petitioning Rome. Once the clamor had died down and Teresa enjoyed 5 years of peace, she often described San Jose as heaven on earth. Now, Teresa devoted much of the rest of her life to traveling around Spain, founding new convents along the ancient monastic traditions. Her travels and work were not always greeted with enthusiasm. Many resented her reforms and the implied criticism of existing orders. One of her critics was the papal nuncio, who used the rather descriptive phrase, this is describing her, a restless, disobedient gadabout who has gone about teaching as though she were a professor. However, Teresa was also much admired, and requests to start new foundations came pouring in. Teresa also had to contend with difficult living conditions and her frail health. However, she never let those obstacles dissuade her from her life's task. One of her famous quotes, oh, you can do this one. One of her famous quotes came from her journey to a town called Burgos to set up a foundation there. It was on the request of some Jesuits. The year was 1582. Burgos was her final destination, her final foundation. Burgos was very far north with a brutal climate. She had to travel in the dead of winter in spite of illness. The journey was possibly the worst yet, with sleet and then driving rain all the way. It's bad enough in a car. Imagine it when you're traveling on a cart with a horse. The journey was possibly the worst yet, with sleet and then driving rain all the way, and flooded roads that threatened to carry the cart away. At one point, she fell off her donkey and fell into the mud, injuring her leg. When the rough carts broke down, they took to boats. At one point, she got fed up and complained to God. "This is how I treat my friends," God answered. Then she retorted, "That is why you have so few of them." That's one of her most famous quotes. And yet it is good to know that when Teresa entered the old town, the people lined the roads, crowded for her blessings, reaching to touch her garments. She rose to the call, but she was deathly ill. As death drew near, all sorts of hideous remedies were tried. She suffered every one with patience, even gratitude. She asked her caretakers to take her to the chapel, and before the altar she lay for a day and a night. As death approached, she cried out, "Oh, my Lord, the longed-for hour has come at last. Now we shall see one another."
Oh,
Teresa died on October 4th, which is St. Francis Day, actually, October 4th, 1582, at the age of 67. One of the sisters described the hours just before the death of St. Teresa. She remained in this position in prayer, full of deep peace and great repose. Occasionally, she gave some outward sign of surprise or amazement, but everything proceeded in great repose. It seemed as though she were hearing a voice, which she answered. Her facial expression was so wondrously changed that it looked like a celestial body to us. Thus immersed in prayer, happy and smiling, she went out of this world into eternal peace. So that's the end of her life. And we can discuss that. Anybody who wants to stay on, we will also discuss her, the last section will be about her writings. So, Catherine, first time I got to see you. Okay, so what do you have comments about? Hi, Catherine. About the founding. Well, specifically, we've been talking about the founding of all the different convents in Spain, but anything else in her earlier life too, if we want to look at that.
no, I have a comment. You mentioned earlier that she was a woman of wit and charm. And from everything that you spoke today, I'm truly, truly impressed that in that age and time, when women were totally bypassed or totally considered weaker sex, and at that time, not only her intelligence and wit and charm, but also her innate courage. She was a woman of outstanding courage. And that reminds me of poet Mira.
Oh, Mira, yes.
Mirabai. And Mirabai was quite a gutsy woman.
Yes.
16th century. She left her kingdom. She was a queen. And in those times, queens are supposed to be just sitting side by side and keep smiling and go along. But she quit everything. She left the kingdom and she started roaming about with all the sadhus and saints.
Yes, she did.
So she was so devoted and courageous to defy rules and regulations. So this Mother Teresa, not Mother, Saint Teresa, I think I've seen her such enormous determination and courage to follow her path.
Yes, she was outstandingly courageous, but she was also outstandingly spiritual, which
Yes.
gives people the strength to do whatever. Who else would like to speak?
I'm going to jump in real quick and just say, when you were talking about her refusing endowments, not wanting endowments,
Yeah.
the convent reminds me of Sri Ramakrishna. I mean, he couldn't even handle money or keep money because it would just mess up his mind too much. So I just saw that connection when you were talking about that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Is it because the great saints or avatars of different traditions, that's one of the main things, is their detachment from money. Of course, Sri Ramakrishna was absolutely extreme in not being able to even touch it, but for us it might be a little inconvenient.
But Christ said the fox hath not nowhere to lay its head.
Yes, yes. Can they hear you?
I don't know whether they can hear me. But in any case, Christ also was, this is why she was following Christ, because Christ did not have a permanent residence. He didn't accept money for what he did. He didn't seek it. And he said, he just said, don't be bothered about it, is what he said. Particularly when he told his followers to go out and preach his new gospel. He said, don't carry money, don't ask for money, just speak. If people accept it, fine, stay and teach some more. Otherwise, shake the dust of that place from your feet.
Right.
And so this is, she was very much following the example of the one who was so well known to her.
Yeah. And I think you can you hear Brother Shankara?
Yes.
There you are. Good.
Can I piggyback on that a little? Just to say that Christ also said, freely you've received, freely give.
Yes, absolutely.
I couldn't see who it was.
That's Lori Finley.
Lori.
And it's what Swami Prabhupada told us. This woman who had been making very little money before World War II, during World War II, because the men went away, she gained a better position in her field and began to make more money. So she asked Swami Prabhupada, Swami, should I have a bank account? And he said, yes, have plenty bank account. Just remember, the money is not yours, it is Sri Ramakrishna's.
Yeah.
And for us to take the attitude, as particularly as monastics, but even as householders, that what we are fortunate enough to by our karma, to things that come into our possession, just don't think of them as yours. Just remember, when you leave this world, you're not going to take any of it with you. So you might as well not regard it as yours now either.
True.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
And if I may, this
Anybody?
is Amadas here.
Amadas.
And
Okay.
it seems to me that money represents like can represent the worst of the world, or the pursuit of money can represent the worst of the world. And I just want to, I want to put a pitch in as we're talking about the material world. I want to put a pitch in for Mother Nature, because that's where I go to find the oneness. When I'm out with the trees and the birds and the raccoons and the possum that ran across me before I parked last night on the farm, that's the oneness, and Mother Nature doesn't lie to me. And I'm still working on that trust of God showing up in everybody else and human beings, because of the challenges that I run into out there. But when Tom talks about looking out at the trees and the birds and that being the material world, yes, it is. And as God's creation, I just have a layer of that separate from, like, when I go downtown to get groceries. That's the worldliness of the world, as separate from Mother Nature. And then money representing because it's the hardest part of my practice is the dealing with the money part of it. And I even said to one of my clients, one day I won't have to deal with money at all. And he's a capitalist, he's a multimillionaire, and he didn't, I said, well, I'll be living in an ashram and my needs will be met, and I won't have to be concerned about an energy exchange for the work that I do or the service that I provide. So just offering different layers of the material world, and offering Mother Nature as a refuge, and not necessarily the same as dealing with money or transactional things. That's all I have to offer.
Thank you. Amadas. That's a nice name. Boy. Okay.
Sean could have gave that to me.
Okay, why don't we look at the books that Saint Teresa wrote? And this is quite substantial, and then we'll be done with the presentation. And anything else you want to say? You want to stay on? That's good. Okay, despite the demands of her administrative and missionary work, Teresa found time to write, first of all, numerous letters. In obedience to her confessors, she wrote 3 books recording her spiritual progress and guiding others in the art of prayer. Her autobiography, The Way of Perfection, and The Interior Castle. Although she tries to hide it, there is nothing in her books that is not a record of her own experience. The autobiography was written, at least in part, because of the hardship Teresa met in trying to make herself understood to her directors and confessors and their suspicions about what she was trying to describe. Their misunderstandings afflicted her greatly, but resulted in her attempt to explain her spiritual state on paper in what has become one of the classics of Christian spirituality, her autobiography. If you have not yet read it, it's really worth a read. This book was written in 1562 and won friends among theologians and teachers of spirituality. Dominicans, Jesuits, secular priests, laymen and women, and even the Bishop of Avila. In founding her first Carmel, Teresa's goals were modest. A small community of 11 nuns who would dedicate themselves to the contemplative life according to the Carmelite rule, observing in particular its spirit of unceasing prayer. After the founding of the new Carmel, the nuns who joined Teresa soon began to feel the need for more practical instruction about the life of prayer. In response to this need, Teresa began another work in 1565, which became known as the Way of Perfection. It seems that many Christians are confused by the word perfection. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, seems to be an unattainable goal. That is because people think of perfection as not making any mistakes, rather than living in the presence of God. Now, I wish I could ask each one of you, does the word perfection hang you up as Vedantins? Because I think Vedantins are taught this is what we're aiming at, perfection. And it does not mean getting all the answers right. Mm-hmm. It means a feeling of the constant presence and the awareness of God. So yeah, I think that Vedantins could read the way of perfection and not get hung up. Teresa stresses that God is very near and in fact can be found within ourselves. To commune with God, there is no need to go to heaven or to speak in a loud voice. God up there. But we have only to find a place where we can be alone and look upon God present within us. If one prays in this way, that is, looking upon God within, the prayer may be vocal, but the mind will be recollected much sooner. It is called recollection because the soul collects together all the faculties and enters within itself to be with its God. A person who has become recollected sees that worldly things are nothing but toys. Teresa describes what she calls the prayer of quiet. In this state, all the faculties are stilled. The soul, detached from the outward senses, realizes that it is now very close to its God, and that if it were but a little closer, it would become one with him through union. But it's not quite there. So is this Savikalpa Samadhi, I think? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't this interesting? If it were but a little closer, it would become one with him through union. So it is not absolute oneness, not Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but a step down, perhaps. If we want to read her description of the very highest states of consciousness, we must turn to the interior castle.
Beautiful.
Teresa was 62 years old, near the end of her life, when she wrote The Interior Castle. It is her most mature exposition of prayer and spiritual states. She wrote it in a condition of rapture. She had no feeling of writing herself, but the Lord wrote through her. Imagine that the soul is a castle, she wrote, made entirely from a diamond or very transparent crystal, where there are many chambers, just as in heaven there are many mansions. The outer wall of the castle is the body. The center of the castle is God's dwelling place. And the gate of entry into the interior castle is prayer. Teresa goes on to give a description of each of the 7 dwelling places, which I think you'll be familiar with them even if you haven't read Teresa. The first dwelling place, when we're in the first dwelling place, that is the body, we are too much distracted by worldly things to experience much of God or even try to search for the true light. So that's the state. I'm very familiar with that state. Mm-hmm. The second dwelling place, the seeker has taken the first steps in practice of prayer and blocked out the world enough to hear God's voice. Now, Tom, who likes to live in the world, maybe won't quite agree, but I'm not sure. We'll find out. Here, people are more receptive to the promptings and invitations of God's grace. The seeker becomes more receptive to sermons, books, and good friendship. Holy company, as they say in Vedanta. However, they still struggle with forces of evil and temptations. Teresa assures her nuns that there's no point in worrying about an occasional inability to pray. You mustn't weary yourself by trying to put sense into something, namely your mind, which is for the moment without any, she quips. The third castle, a third dwelling place. To persevere in prayer and the struggle involved is to go forward. Those who have come to this stage begin to guard against sin, are fond of ascetical practices and periods of recollection. They seek to use their time well. They're charitable toward neighbors. However, this is only up to the third, and we're going up to 7, so the third place, they may be reluctant to part with wealth and honor. They may be too easily shocked by the faults of others and too quickly distraught by a little dryness. Though these persons find more consolation in spiritual life than they do in material comforts and distractions, they are not normally able to dive very deep in contemplation. Okay, now we're getting interesting here. The fourth dwelling place is where supernatural or mystical experience begins. It is a contemplative prayer in which the experience of recollection is brought on not by self-effort, but by God. Teresa calls it infused prayer. Spiritual delight is received not through human efforts, but passively. However, the intellect does continue to move about. In an effort to explain the difference between acquired and infused prayer, Teresa turns to an analogy. She talks about different ways in which water troughs are filled. One trough is filled with water channeled through aqueducts, but by the exercise of a great deal of ingenuity, while the other is filled by a spring bubbling up from the very spot where the trough is. So that's, when it starts to become more natural. Now, this is very interesting. How she draws the distinction between Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi without knowing those terms. The fifth dwelling place in the prayer is the prayer of union, in which faculties are completely silent. There's a feeling of certainty that the soul was in God and God was in it. Such certitude is not present when the union is merely partial, as in the previous dwelling place. However, although the soul feels certainty about its relationship with God, the seeker still feels a separation between the soul and God. So you hear so much about that, don't you, in Vedanta? Do you feel a separation between the Atman and Brahman, or do you not? The sixth, now this is the sixth. We're getting up there now. It is not until one comes to the sixth dwelling place that the soul is joined with God in ecstasy. There is no separation between the self and God. Although the soul in the sixth dwelling place is without outward consciousness, it was never before so awake to the things of God, or did it ever before have so deep an enlightenment and knowledge of God. The soul rejects all earthly things except those that can be used in the Lord's service. Joy will reach such an excess that the soul will want to be a herald to the entire world, that all might help it praise the Lord. Wow. So I would say this. This is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, is not? Yes. That's what she's talking about here. Yes. And yet, of course, she's experienced this. But if Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we've reached Nirvikalpa Samadhi, how can there be a seventh dwelling place? What is beyond that? Well, you know, because you studied the life of Sri Ramakrishna. The seventh dwelling place is the absolute epitome a spiritual realization in which dwelling in God has become so natural that the person does not lose consciousness or lose equilibrium, but goes about doing good works. The spirit is made one with God. This union makes Teresa think of the rain that has fallen into a river or a stream that enters the sea, or of the beams of light entering a room through different windows and becoming one. The soul has an habitual vision of God, but that does not interfere with multiple and diverse daily duties carried out as acts of service. Is that interesting? I mean, it's the purpose of all these splendid favors is that one might live like Christ, and the fruit of the union will be good works. Now, I just, one of the things that really strikes me when I consider the life of, spiritual giants like Saint Teresa or Swami Vivekananda is that these great contemplatives who knew the heights of God realization were also very active.
Yes, yes, yes.
Perhaps Teresa's scheme of the dwelling places, and especially the seventh dwelling place, gives us an insight as to why this is so. A few closing things. Just want to say, okay, she died at 67. We've already said that. But she was canonized in 1662, and then in 1970, she became a doctor of the church. Now, if you don't know what a doctor of the church is, I can explain that a little bit. She was the first woman to receive this distinction. This doctor of the church had had 2 years of formal education, but many years practice and experience. May she be an inspiration to us all.
Amen.
There's one little poem she wrote, and then I'll be done. This was following lines of advice that she wrote on a bookmark. And this is quite famous too. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things pass. God is unchanging. Patience obtains all. Whoever has God needs nothing else. God alone suffices. God alone suffices, one of her most famous sayings, I think. So,
Wow.
anybody have any comments about her writing, or especially if we haven't heard from you yet? Swayam.
I have
It's hard not to have everything.
I have spoken so many times, so I will wait for somebody else to speak.
Yes, let's have somebody else speak first, and then we'll see what time the rest of us have.
Sister, hello, namaste. Do
Oh,
you hear me?
Sundar. Okay.
My name is Niranjana. I'm Sundar's wife. We are sharing the same Zoom.
Oh, I see.
As we're casting it on television.
Niranjana is the stainless one, right?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I got to know the meaning very recently. Yeah. Okay. So my question is, sister, initially you had mentioned that Saint Teresa as a child was very attracted to decorating herself, like making herself very presentable and all that. So was the turning point in her life after she was put in the convent by her father, or was it after the malaria?
I think it was, I mean, she started to turn in the convent because, she was not well and she had to spend a lot of time just in her room. And so she read, and what was available to read in the convent but spiritual books. So she might have chosen worldly ones if they'd been there, but Yeah, so through the reading of spiritual books, and yeah, being in the convent.
So the convent introduced spiritual books to her, which continued with her as
Yeah.
she went
Yeah.
into a bad health phase and all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Isn't there also reason to believe that her nearly dying of the illness, being 3 days in a coma and so on, had a profound effect on her? Ladinsky alludes to that.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, there was a whole process really, because and then her conversion experience. So yeah.
Thank you, Niranjana.
Yes, thank you.
I have a follow-up question, sister. So, and even when she first joined the Carmelite, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. She had a good time chatting with wealthy aristocrats and so on. So, what was the turning point for her when she started embracing Jesus Christ's path of poverty and all that? So, when did she?
Well, you
Like-
could see that, like so many people, she was torn. You know, on the one hand, it was kind of fun to chat with the wealthy aristocrats, but she also felt unhappy in that convent. There's something wrong here. And so then she started more, you know, reading of devotional works and yeah, so it wasn't really I don't think a sudden conversion in her case, but she just could not do just the worldly life. It just did not suit her.
Okay.
And
So
she
it's
had gone back and forth even as a small child. She was very attracted to devotional practice and all that. And then after her mother died, she turned to, you know, worldly things. And so it was, yeah,
Okay.
It took a while. It was a process, but boy, did she get far. So, Tom, what do you think? Having heard what she says about material things.
Well, first, I like the fact you pointed out that they use the word worldly a lot more than the word material.
Yeah.
But I just don't. I don't think there's any real division for me between what's worldly and what's spiritual. It's just life, moment to moment. So I guess I think it's an arbitrary division. I don't think, for me, it's not meaningful.
Okay.
There is, Sri Aurobindo said that money, power, and sex are the greatest attraction for the asura. And
Right.
I can sort of relate it to the temptation that they talk about, you know, the sins and the demons and the sins. And any thoughts on that? Like, there's a difference. Like initially, there's like a huge recoil from all these things. Like the saints want to sort of, they fear those things, and then like in the seventh stage when they come back, it doesn't matter to them anymore. Like it's disappeared.
Yeah. Yes. But when you say money, sex, and power, the first thing that comes to my mind is how do you know if, of course, if you're in the Ramakrishna order, you're pretty safe, but hey, you're looking for a guru. And how do you know whether it's a genuine guru? Because there's a lot of fakes out there too. So that's what they say to look for. How does this person handle money, sex, and power? Yeah, Tom.
I'd like to put in a positive word for sex. I think there can be all kinds of problems with sex, you know, compulsions and addictions and selfishness and so on. But the positive, there's a reason they call it making love. The positive side of sex is it really does create a loving bond between two people, and it's really a great thing. And I don't think that there's any, at least everybody's different. Like I've said, I know some people through celibacy raise the Kundalini energy through their body, but for me, there's no conflict between sexuality and the highest states of mind.
Well, I think when they say watch out with this potential guru, some potential gurus are really attract a whole harem of of women, and I mean they really misuse their position.
May I add something about the last 7 absolute epiphany? That so much sounds similar to what we call Jivan Mukta.
Mm-hmm.
Those people who have realized God, like Ramakrishna or Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi, they are still functioning in the world and serving people, serving others. And when many people ask Gandhi, if you are so spiritual, why are you in politics? And he said that those who see politics and spirituality as different, they don't know what is true religion. So he was using politics as a karma field for God to serve God. So these people, after having realized God, they stay in the world, but they are totally detached from the world and still active. So
Mhm.
that to me seems to be a epiphany, correct word, that they have realized, but they are not selfish. They are here to help others out.
Mm.
That is
Thank
what
you.
I wanted to say something.
Yes,
Your
Bhagarat.
yeah, Bhagirath, yes. The last point about the 7 dwellings is a culmination of her life. Because
Yes,
7 is a very sacred number.
yes,
That is why Saptarshi, 7 Rishis. So
yeah.
7 is thought to be a very sacred word. But the word perfection needs to be modified in Sanskrit context. We don't call it perfect, we call it Purna, complete. And the journey is from defect to perfect, from Nyuna to Sampurna. And therefore, those 7 dwellings are the natural progression of a life if it is allowed to progress. And therefore, each dwelling from one to the other has a password, and that password is a prayer. The prayer keeps on changing and leads you from one to the other. So perhaps what Tom says, that yes, for money, for sex, or whatever it is, yes, it is a good transitional stage. You cannot be arrested there. You have to go into the next dwelling and next dwelling. And the one which will lead you is a prayer, the power of the prayer. And then ultimately, when you reach the 7th, you do not need anything because you have become a part of God. And that's what she became.
Yes, that's beautiful. Yes.
Thank you. Oh, somebody else wants to speak up?
OMG, go ahead. I will talk.
Okay. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for a most wonderful talk, and thanks to everyone for all the input. I've learned a lot. I just wanted to share a light-hearted moment, with a child. At least I found it very, I don't know, funny is the word, but we have friends and they have 2 children. One is 7 going on 8, and the other one just turned 6. And they were visiting us recently, and they were playing a game to name a fruit beginning with each letter of the alphabet. So A for apple, B for banana, C for cantaloupe. And when they came to D, they got stuck. And so they asked me, can you think of a fruit with beginning with D? So all I could think of was dates. So I said dates. So I said, oh yeah, dates. And then I asked them, do you know what dates are? So the girl said, yeah, I've eaten that. It has a little seed inside it and tastes sweet. Yeah, I've eaten that. The 6-year-old says, it also means love. And I will never eat a date because it means eating 2 people.
That's funny. Yeah.
Well, namaste, sister. Namaste, everybody.
Oh, yes. We didn't hear you before. That's right.
It was a wonderful session, and thank you for coming.
Yes.
And it was very soothing. That's the first word it would come to my mind, to hear you, and someone who has lived that kind of a life. And I was born and brought up in India, and I went to a convent school. I'm talking about mid-70s, and we had 7 or 8 subjects, and 3 of the subjects were taught by European nuns to me. So they were European, and because the British had just left 30 years ago, and probably they are even teaching them now. So, when I was a kid, in the elementary schools, right from kindergarten, these nuns were around us who were teaching, and the first thing was the soothing effect. They were very, very, very sattvic, very pure souls. And the same effect, I got that today after years and years. So thank you so much. Please do come often and bless our congregation by your presence and by your wisdom. Thank you.
Well, on Zoom, I can come anytime. I can come from home.
Absolutely.
What part of India are you from?
I'm from Pune, near Mumbai.
Okay.
And the school I went to, it was a church which was built in 1840 by Swiss Army. And so it was 135 years old when I went to the school then. Now it is 165 or 70 years. It's probably the oldest church, and it's 100 acres of land is what our school campus was. It was that big. And it was so wonderful. I used to go, and there was a huge church, youth chapel. We don't see it here that huge, but something like you would see in Europe. So the same effect I had, that, my mind was going back. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And last word, not only.
You want the last word?
Last word, if I may, inspiring. It's not only soothing, it's inspiring. You just stirred something within us that we would like to pursue. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, and because everyone was so enjoyed this, she mentioned she could Zoom in from home. We will arrange that.
I could do another program.
She lives in New Jersey, so she's in the same time zone with us. So it won't be any difficulty for her, if she doesn't have other responsibilities that conflict, for her to offer us other talks, and that would be very welcome. We'll iron that out.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, because so many things that were touched on today could be whole talks,
Yes.
discussions.
The 7-story castle, for example.
Oh yeah, that's just
that to
incredible. It's just
comparing that to the last chapters of the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, in which Christ talks to her about a 7-story experience of, and then of course it can be compared to Patanjali's yoga as well.
By the way, I just wanted to mention, for those of you who don't check the chat, I put a link to the PDF of Saint Teresa of Avila's autobiography. And
good.
I'm sure that there are different translations. This is on the CarmeliteMonks.org site. It says translated and edited by E. Allison Piers. Does that mean anything to you?
Yes,
sister?
E. Allison Piers is a well-known translator.
Is that a good one or is there a better
Yeah,
one?
I did classic. Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean,
anyway,
it's true. There's a lot of translations to choose from. So yeah, I'd
Thank you,
probably go for
Cindy.
E.
It's
Allison
so
Piers
typical
because
of her
it's.
to do that. So typical of Cindy to find that and then post the link.
Oh
so that
yes,
anybody who wants to download it can download it.
she's a good computer person. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she's our web person.
Yeah.
we all just click on the chat and you'll see it.
She lives in Tucker, Georgia.
She lives right here, about a
I
corner.
live less than half a mile from the center. I could yell and you'd hear me.
Oh, that's lucky.
Yes, it's very lucky for me. All right, my dears, if there's nothing more, we'll close with our regular chants. Anything else from anyone before we close?
Just some more thanks to you, sister. Really appreciate this.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Joy.
Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Jai
Shri Guru Maharaj Ji ki
Jai.
jai.
Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we go forward in the Lord's loving and protective embrace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So we will definitely arrange with Sister Eleanor Francis to offer us other talks in the future. And I'm glad that was mentioned, and I think it would have arisen anyway, but that we know it's going to be a matter of conversation now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming. As always, what a joy to be with you and share your holy company. Until next time.
Let's see.
Next week, it will be the Raja Yoga of Lord Jesus Christ.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And then on the 26th, we will celebrate Holy Mother's birthday. That'll be it for the year. Of course, on January 1st, we will observe Kalpatarunti. So, you want to hit the end button there?
You know, I don't know how you use
Let me
this.
just sit there and do it then.
I think I can do it. She's much better
No,
than
I'm
I
not.
am at this sort of thing.
So
The end button, yeah.
And then that'll bring up
And meeting
Be
for
for all, yeah.